So we would be ready to start right now.
Ja. Darf ich beginnen? Ja.
We wait
Okay.
still. Ladies
Wir
and
warten auf
gentlemen,
Robert,
welcome.
glaube ich. Ja.
Welcome to the press conference following the 52nd Franco-German Economic and Financial Council. Welcome to Minister Le Maire, welcome to Minister Habeck, and welcome to Minister Lindner. We start with the statements of the ministers, and afterwards we have time for a few questions. Minister Le Maire, the floor is yours.
Sehr gut, danke. So we just had the 52nd session of the Franco-German Economic and Financial Council with my two friends, Robert Habeck and Christian Lindner. First of all, we agree that the key challenge that we all have to face, both in France and Germany, is inflation. The high level of inflation is a matter of concern for all of us, and there is a necessity to fight against this level of inflation by all means, which means finding the right balance between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Or fiscal policy should aim at supporting the private households and the private companies that are the most severely hit by the increase of gas and electricity prices. And we share the same view on the necessity of providing support to both households and private companies in this fight against inflation and high-level prices, which means also the necessity to complement our decisions on the European energy market. You know that we already agreed at the European level on the proposals put on the table by the Commission on a common platform of gas purchase and the necessity of changing the TTF index. We also agree on the necessity of reducing our consumption of energy. But there is clearly a need to move faster and to move further. And we will continue to explore together, both France and Germany, additional measures to move faster and to move further on this energy question. We must also think about the post-crisis situation, which implies to preserve the level playing field between the United States and the European Union. I think that the American Inflation Reduction Act is a matter of concern, not only for France and Germany, but also for all European countries. So we need to work on the adequate European responses to this American Inflation Reduction Act, which might jeopardize the level playing field between our two continents. I would like also to mention 4 points on which we have decided to work together and to accelerate the discussions and the decisions. The first one is the minimum corporate tax. You know that we have been working for more than 5 years on this minimum corporate tax. We are waiting for the support from Hungary, but we have decided with Christian Lindner that in case there is no agreement at the European level, no unanimity before the end of 2022, in that case, we will introduce national legislation to have this minimum corporate tax being implemented at the national level between France and Germany, waiting for the support of all the 27 member states. The second point on which we have decided to work together is the improvement of the Ibc Framework. We think with Robert Habeck that there is a necessity to move faster on the implementation of the Ibc and that we could improve the Ibc Framework. The third point is the proposal put on the table by Robert on a cooperation on artificial intelligence. I think it is of utmost importance to go this way and to have this common cooperation between our two countries on artificial intelligence. And the very last point, which is also related to the question of the post-crisis situation, is the necessity to accelerate on the capital market union, because if we want to provide enough funding for innovation and investments and to improve the level of growth in our two countries and within the European Union, there is a need to accelerate on the capital market union. So I invited both Christian Lindner and Robert Habeck to come to Paris, because clearly there is a need to accelerate and to go into some deeper details on all those questions to pave the way for common ground between our two countries on those strategic issues.
Minister Habeck.
Thank you very much, dear Bruno. I gladly will come to Paris. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you and Christian and also the heads of the central banks, François-Valery de Gallo and Dr. Joachim Nagel, for the fruitful discussions we had in the last hour. So the Franco-German Economic and Financial Council has quite a long and strong tradition, I would like to start with and to say, and this is more important in times of crisis as we are now facing. And our common understanding is that the Franco-German cooperation is part of the European solidarity, which is so important in these times and which was so successful regarding the sanctions and also the cooperation on all energy measures in the past months. So this really was important and is important in the future, and we discussed all the topics we had with the perspective of strengthening the European solidarity. Let me just comment or take on some of the points Bruno Le Maire just mentioned. First of all, while we exchanged our views about the GDP growth and inflation, and the situation in France and Germany is quite similar, and this has a reason. We have to bring the energy prices down, and we agreed, as Bruno Le Maire said, on some measures that are now to be discussed in the Council within the round of the leaders. The ones I would like to mention is a common purchasing platform, so buying gas on the world market with a common approach. Actually, this could have been done further. And the second one is the demand reduction of energy. Then we discussed the global situation regarding the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. And first of all, I would like to say that it is very, very good, a good sign, a strong sign that the US-American government is now fighting climate change with a very, very strong package. But this package must not destroy the level playing field between our two economies, the European and the US economy. So, and there we see a danger. It needs a strong answer from the European side. We discussed several measures, and these discussions should also be taken very, very serious. We see that companies and firms are drawn away from Europe to the US because of the strong subsidies paid there. And we can't go in a trade war in times like this. We are partners even across the Atlantic. So from the European, from the Franco-German side, this is not only a good development. So we are in good talks with our American partners, but this needs definitely a strong answer, a strong European reply. This reply could also include some of the measures Bruno Le Maire mentioned that are necessary to strengthen our economic growth and our industries. This is a booster package for renewables, that we increase our amount of clean energy, including hydrogen production, and the digitalization and artificial intelligence, a cooperation in new forms of industries, digital forms of industries. This is something Germany and France can really bring forward. Last not least, we need a strong flow of capital in Europe and between the countries and to Europe. And the Capital Markets Union is an important instrument to supply Europe, the industries, with enough capital in times like this. We know that the situation now is difficult in Europe. Maybe it's not so, it's a little bit difficult to get all the member states, the 27 member states, to one agreement. But the idea of the Franco-German Economic and Financial Council is that we lead the way, that we cooperate and then invite others to share our cooperation. And with this understanding, I think we, Germany and France, should do the next steps also on the the Capital Markets Union to supply our industries with enough capital in times like this. Thank you very much.
Minister Lindner.
Bonjour und guten Tag. So the second German minister enters the floor. Germany needs 2 ministers to reply to one Bruno Le Maire. This is reality. Well, today we at the 52nd meeting of the Franco-German Finance and Economic Council. And even though we meet very often and almost on a daily basis, this format remained for very good reason. The Franco-German relationship is special and it is crucial for the development of the European Union. We have the strongest partnership within the European Union and again and again, together developed positions had set impulses for Europe as a whole. Frankly, when France and Germany and Robert and myself find common ground, this is always good news for Europe as a whole. Today we have agreed that the current situation is a signal to strengthen supply-side economic policies. We have to promote self-sustaining growth by boosting the productivity and by expanding capacities. We have to improve the framework conditions for SME and for industry to encourage more private sector investments across Europe. We don't need to fear the Inflation Reaction Act of the United States when we make efforts to strengthening our competitiveness. The single market is our tool to have more productivity, and now we have to prepare the next steps. So we agreed on making further efforts towards Capital Markets Union. It would strengthening our competitiveness and would foster private sector investments, especially for the digital and green transition. High inflation rates are a challenge for monetary and fiscal policies. We have agreed that both monetary and fiscal policies should work hand in hand. And this means that we as governments must not counter the measures of the central banks. We have to protect our private households and our businesses, but we must not further fuel inflation by strengthening the demand in our economies. And my last point, I would like to add, the current situation of inflation underlines the need for sound public finances. And we agreed that we have to return to sustainable public finances after this severe crisis. We have to unlock the existing resources in tools like the resilience and recovery funds, and we have to we form the Stability and Growth Pact in a way that combines a reliant path to debt reduction and rebuilding fiscal buffers on the one hand, with a more realistic approach and the capacities for public sector investments in the crucial branches and challenges like green and digital transition. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, ministers. Then we have time for a few questions, maybe 4 questions, and we try a fair distribution between international press, French press, and German press. So the first question, Giorgio Leali, Politico.
Thank you very much. I have a question for both ministers about the postponement of a Franco-German summit next week. I was wondering whether this tells something about a difficulty in Franco-German cooperation, even if it's a different format from the one of today. I was just curious to have a reaction from the 3 ministers about this. And my second question is about the proposal that has been made by Commissioner Gentiloni and Commissioner Breton about having new tools to face the new monetary and economic tools to face the current crisis. And Minister Lindner insisted that current funding are sufficient. I was wondering whether this idea should be debated in the next European Council. Thank you.
Maybe Minister Le Maire, you want to start?
Yes, I just want to precise that the postponement of the CEFA is linked only to difficulties on the agenda of some ministers, but it has nothing to do with any kind of political difficulties. It is only linked to agenda complexities. As far as the second point is concerned, we will examine very carefully the very last proposal put on the table by the 2 commissioners. But since we are in the process of adopting our budget, I did not have sufficient time to examine those proposals into further details.
Minister Lindner, you want to add?
Yes, please. During the pandemic, we have seen a temporary crisis instruments, SURE and Next Generation EU. But now the situation differs from the pandemic. We have no problem on the demand side. We have problems on the supply side. We have inflation. We have to face inflation and not an economic downturn comparable with the pandemic. And now we have no concerns with regard to the labor markets. They are stable. This is why I don't see any need for new European fiscal instruments, since we already have very powerful instruments in place. In our meeting, I mentioned that today the available amount, sum up to roughly 300 billion euro. So let us make best use of the already existing funds and let us implement our national recovery plans. I think this will work out very well.
So we have time for 2 more questions. Next question, Frank Jordans, AP.
Good afternoon. On your concerns about the US Inflation Reduction Act, are you ruling out tit-for-tat measures by the European Union, or are you hopeful that you can either get concessions from the US or get EU competitiveness up to speed so that the hurdles European companies face in the US now don't matter?
So who wants to start? Minister Le Maire again?
Yes, so we are not talking about tit-for-tat response. That's not the kind of response we want to give to the Inflation Reduction Act. But first, this is a matter of concern, and of great concern, because what is at stake is, of course, the level playing field between the American industry and the European one. And we want to preserve the level playing field between the 2 continents. Second, there is a need to explore all the options with our European partners. But first of all, there is a need to discuss the situation with our European partners. And third, we should seize any opportunities that we have to talk to the US administration and to explain very clearly that we do not want to be hit by these very last decisions of the Biden administration and by the consequences of the Inflation Reduction Act. As Robert just said, and I fully agree on the assessment made by Robert, we don't want to enter into any new trade war. This would be a total failure between the US and the EU, and this is exactly what we want to avoid. So there is a need to talk, there is a need to gather our assessments among European countries, and there is a need to make very clear that the level playing field must remain at the core of our policies.
No, it's fine. Oh, Bruno Le Maire said it all.
And we have a last question, and this is Nikolaus Kurmeier, Euraktiv.
Well, to put it plainly, you spoke a lot of improving connection, moving together closer in Europe, also in response to the IRA. Question that is on my mind, sort of picking up what the colleague mentioned earlier, with the breakdown on the progress to construct MidCat, something that might prove pivotal to German industry to secure gas short-term, hydrogen mid-term. Have you made any progress on this?
Maybe I can start, Bruno. MidCat is not important for the current situation. It can be only built and be operational after the current situation, so 22-23 is over. This is not, it's not possible to build it in 22 or 23. So it's a future project, if it is a project. And of course, the German position you are well aware of is that we have to interconnect Europe also on the electricity level with grids and on the hydrogen level with pipeline systems. And this is an invitation, I would say. Germany will provide its neighbors with energy, but it needs also energy. We will get part of the energy with our own production, and on the other hand, we will buy energy. And we will find partners selling us green hydrogen around the world. But of course, it is worth thinking about if we can't strengthen the European situation on that. And this is the German view, and we are discussing it with the Spanish government and with the French government. And I think we clearly agree on, and there was some progress made in the past weeks and months under the pressure of the need of the day that Europe becomes closer in energy cooperation than ever before. And I think this progress will also lead to other progress.
Anything to add by the other ministers?
Nothing to add.
Then I say thank you very much, Minister Le Maire, Minister Lindner,
Vielen Dank.
Minister Habeck.
Und bis bald. Tschüss, alles Gute.